up, John?
Hey, guys. What's up?
So, John, before we get into the game stuff, EB asked a question, and none of us really had the answer. Why was Jamin Davis inactive? Do you know the answer?
I don't have the good answer there either. So it's funny because that did not come up after the game. And, he wasn't on the injury report or anything like that. And so I don't have a good answer. Sorry.
I'm wondering if it was like disciplinary or, because he played pretty well. I just don't understand the thing.
Yeah, I can't imagine some sort of disciplinary thing. That's not Davis, right? So I think I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't have a good answer for that. And it's something like after the game, there's so many other things to talk about, but that is something that more to ask today, like why that one? Because last week he had a couple nice plays. It's not like I watched every play and grade every play of his, but you saw some things that were pretty good. And, so yeah.
I think that the reason maybe it's relevant to us is they didn't have much of a pass rush yesterday. Daniel Jones, very comfortable, and Jamin is somebody who, at least there was some hope that he would provide some pass rush. What'd you make overall of the defensive pressure?
Well, a couple of things. One, where Davis actually has helped them is more against the run. He hasn't applied the pass rush as a pass rusher from the edge. He was better maybe if he's standing up and maybe looping to the inside, those kind of things. So I don't know that would have been much different at all. But as far as the pressure goes, where I have the bigger problem is the run, because they're getting hurt on the ground.
Yep.
And gaps are there, and used to seeing Payne and Allen being way more effective inside than they've shown so far. And not putting it all on them, because when you're defending the run, it takes more. But it's just, you're used to seeing these guys make more plays, and around across the board, we're not seeing that. And so I think, to me, that's more troubling than the pass game, because if you can't stop the run in this league, you're going to have a long season.
Yeah.
Are you putting that on the – I know it's not all on the defensive tackles. Are you putting some of that on the linebackers and the safeties too, missing tackles?
I think you put it on everybody when you're doing that, because when in the past, what we've always seen, and whenever there's a run defensive struggles, guys are getting out of gaps, guys are getting moved. So it's all of that. And there's sometimes, it could be a safety fit, but it usually has seemed like guys are getting moved a little bit or out of the gaps inside for whatever reason. And it's just, and I also wonder too, like, they just didn't spend much time playing together this preseason. And I wonder if there is still a lingering effect on that, or what is it? And I think that's going to be something to watch. And I don't have a good answer for that. So, because we've seen it, but what I know is there are too many big gaps that guys are getting through, and it's it's going to be hard to survive if you don't improve in that area.
I was under
the pressure has to get better too. I thought there'd be more, a little bit more pressure designs that would help, but
100%. That's exactly what I was going to bring up, John.
Yeah.
I was under the impression this was going to be more like a Greg Williams defense, where you got pressure coming from all places, because you can't hold up on the back end, so you're going to have to take some chances. And then I'm watching this, and I feel like Ron and Jack are coaching the defense at times.
And it's funny, because I was thinking about that this morning too, and just like I thought, what does it take again? Because. And I don't want to just put everything on it's new, but it is new, right? But I don't want to just say, well, it's just because it's new, because I don't know that it's just because of that. I don't know. But yes, I thought there'd be a little bit more of that. And I do. It's not like they're not sending pressures. They are, right? I think that's one where when I go back and watch this morning is just to watch more of that, like what is going on there? Are they as effective? Why, why, right? That's always a question, but I thought there'd be a little bit more, but again, I don't want to say that they're, I know I've seen some, but what I know is it's not getting home.
Right.
And, and sometimes guys have to win, and if you're not having guys that win enough, then it's just going to be a struggle. But I thought there'd be a little bit more of that. And does it take time to build to that? I think we'll see, but I know we all know it has to get better. And I think that defense was really bad last year, and it was really bad. And so there were a lot of changes for a reason, but man, it's got to get better.
So John, through 2 weeks, Evans, Godwin, and now Neighbors have feasted on the secondary. Jamar Chase and possibly T. Higgins coming back from a hamstring injury loom on Monday Night Football. How did they make adjustments? Because we know that Chase is going to be motivated. He's got 10 catches for a little bit under 100 yards at this point. He's looking to have a big game against, obviously, a depleted secondary.
And then Marvin Harrison Jr., too, the week after. So, and a very improved Arizona offense. So, yes, how does it improve? I mean, it goes back to I'll say this, again, you've got to stop the run. You've got to apply pressure because the corners are what they are, and that's not going to change. And, when you're in position to make a tackle, make a tackle. And there were a couple of times, and then there were a couple of times, too, like with Neighbors, where he's running the crosser and Wagner gets caught up in traffic and he and Davis collide a little bit, and that's all he needed. And I don't know, I think he probably had to get in the ball anyways, but so some of those are that's a little thing that you can clean up, right? Like something like that. But again, I would say you've got to apply some pressure.
All right, let's talk
because that's the way that you can increase that. I just don't see how you're not going to change who you have in the secondary.
All right, let's talk about some of the positives. First, we'll start with Brian Robinson. Maybe a star turn for him. I don't know. I thought he looked great in the preseason. Week 1, didn't really see that. But this is kind of what I was hoping for. I didn't expect 8 yards per carry, but he really looked good. And then, Eckler looks like he's got his legs. So, I mean, I really like that duo. In fact, I'd still like to see him use Eckler even more.
They're very effective, and I think what we're seeing from those two is legit. Robinson, with a couple things, like someone else said this in the press box, like he's running angry, and like that 4th down and 1, he just barreled over somebody 5 yards after first contact, right? Mm-hmm. And then I think the vision has been pretty good. I like the design of the run game better in terms of with the pulling action, et cetera. And then also I think it was on the 32-yard run, this is where Jaden Daniels helps. And we saw this with Robert in 12, right, where you have to honor the quarterback's legs. And there was one time where Thibodeau is coming up as a left end, could have just come right at the mesh point and leveled Robinson, but he's got to pause because of Daniels. And then Cosme's pulling, takes care of another tackle. Biadasz just seals Lawrence inside, and there goes Robinson for 32. But that's like the little detail on that with the threat of the legs helps create some of that, right? And then, I mean, listen, Robinson has vision and all that, but without that, then, you're talking about a guy who's like, maybe in the backfield getting tackled. But so I think this is legit for them. Now, obviously, he's not going to average 8 yards a carry, but I think you can use him a lot more. And I also think that Eckler has looked good all summer. Yeah. So what he's doing is a surprise. And it's funny because after they signed him, you heard like, he's lost a step, he's lost this. Well, he had the high ankle sprain last year. That kind of impacts a running back in your ability to cut in particular. And I think what we're seeing is you saw on, I think it was like the 3rd, and he had that run inside the red zone, like on 3rd. It was the one that set up the 4th and 1 where they had the first false start. But on that run, he's almost slaloming down the slope, like just the way his body's moving and swerving and cutting in short space was impressive. And that's what you see from him too. So, he's pretty strong for his size. Yeah. And so, I think that's a good combination for them. And I think I think you can lean on that a little bit more. You can continue to lean on that as you go forward, because I think that's, you want to create an identity. I think you can start with those guys.
Listen, I love that we had 37 minutes of time of possession. That was amazing. I mean, that was really a key. But I'm not still sold on this offense yet. I don't get it. And right when I was about to explode, they finally run that little creative little screenplay or whatever that you know, and that was great. And then they started throwing downfield a little bit. I know they're trying to break Daniels in slowly. They don't want to expose him, and don't have the greatest offensive line. I get it. But, 10, 11, 12 passes behind the line of scrimmage. I mean, the way they're utilizing Terry is kind of frustrating. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it yet. I'm torn on this one.
Yeah, and, I think part of it, too, is how does watching Jaden evolve as the quarterback, right? And just there's a couple of things. One thing I really liked from yesterday, he doesn't force the ball into areas, right? And they're playing a lot of zone. They're keeping everything in front, and they knew about the pressure, so they want to get things out quick. So I get that. But what I also like, there was a play early in the game where New York blitzed a little bit more than I thought they would. Well, actually, not that I thought. Then they showed in the first week. But it's not surprising because you knew they had problems with it last week, so they're going to continue to face that. But there's one time where it's like, okay, you had a swing pass to Robinson, but the dig to Diami's open on the other side. So, I think it's one of those things like you're not expecting the blitz, but then the backside safety comes, and then if you see that, you can get to the backside. That's part of the growth of a quarterback, right? And I think, there's sometimes even last week where that was the case, where he admitted that sometimes you're predetermining a read, and then can you go to something else as you get more comfortable? I think the answer with him is yes. So that's where I think you can see the growth. Like the growth potential is there because of his growth potential. I mean, he's making plays and not turning it over while he's learning the position in the NFL. And, I think you can watch guys like Caleb Williams and see it's not easy, even if you have a lot of talent around you. And so I think that's where the growth potential is. And then the run game, I'll take my chances with an offense that's gaining 425 yards and getting in the red zone a lot, because eventually you've got to break through, right? I mean, you would think, right? And so that's for the offense, the encouraging thing is you move the ball up and down the field. It's just that in the red zone, the penalties, the sacks, that's where, and then it's do you have the guys to then get free down there enough to win? And so that's where it's can they do that? But
they caught two major breaks, John, because of the Gano hammy.
Oh yeah.
And then the neighbors drop. But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You talked about the false starts, 10 penalties for 70 yards. I don't know how many of those were offensive. I think the majority of them.
7 or maybe.
Yeah. Is that all on the offensive line, or is some of that because of cadence for Jaden? What's going on there?
I think because we saw that this summer too. There were a decent number of false start penalties in practices. Oh, okay. And oftentimes it can go back to cadence. It's not blaming the quarterback. I think it's getting used to the quarterback's cadence for guys in certain areas. And if you're changing it up in certain areas, and I was talking to Nick Allegretti, the guard, about this afterwards. He's like, if a new guy comes on board and everything's established, it's a little bit easier to get used to something versus everybody is getting used to everything at this point. So, is it just that? I don't, I think for their sake, they have to hope so, because otherwise it's a bigger problem, because you would think that you can get used to that by now. What I'd say is it's completely unacceptable. I mean, it killed them a number of times. It's great to control the ball, but if you control the ball like this and settle for field goals against Cincinnati, Arizona, you're losing both games, period. It's always about controlling the ball, resulting in touchdowns. And, you can beat a bad team that way, but you can't beat a good team that way. And so, I think some of that is related to that. But again, by this point, you need to start getting a little bit more used to it than to keep committing those kind of penalties. I mean, that's a killer. And it's the one of the things I like with this coaching staff is that they will say this is unacceptable. I don't, even Joe Witt last week was like, I don't want to hear that it was one, first game, because you only get 17 of these things. So you've got to be better each time. I think that's the only approach you can take, because I think if you take that, you have a better chance to get better rather than, trying to find reasons why or making excuses. No.
Well, John, it is to tell the truth Monday. I'm sure it's really different than what they've done in the past, but he's got a brand name to it.
Yeah, he does, and there's a lot of truth telling that needs to be told, because there again, especially on defense, there's just things that are, it just has to be better. And yeah, I mean, but the penalties there, they don't have the playmakers to overcome. Like what they had to do is go on these long drives, and that's a hard way to sustain life in the NFL on offense. You know, it's why playmakers get paid a lot of money, because you can shorten those drives, and you don't have enough of those guys to offset committing those to shooting yourself in the foot that often. You just can't. But they're getting, but here it goes back to like Daniel's ability to be very smart with the ball. And I don't know that I remember a pass in the last 2 games was like, oh man, that should have been picked. Whereas like, with Howell, with Heineke, with those guys, like there'd be like, oh yeah.
Maybe the floater to Ertz. Maybe that was kind of a floater.
Maybe. Oh yeah, and he couldn't step into that one, but that wasn't a bad decision.
Right.
You can't step it, but yes.
No, they're not living on the edge like they did with Howell and other guys for sure.
In his back pocket, and so I think when you make the other mistakes, if you're not turning it over, you still have a chance.
Yep.
And that, but there are definitely things that have to get better. But I think that the number one thing I'd be encouraged by is just the way a young quarterback has handled himself in the game. I mean, it's, so.
All right, thanks, John.
The run game is really good. So,
Thank you, John.
Thanks, guys.